Welcome to
Recording
the
started.
point with welcome to the point with Duke Rodriguez, candidate for New Mexico governor. Duke, it's great having you on board and appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Mick. I look forward to having this conversation.
So I took, I wrote, I talked to friends, I've got ideas of what to talk about. And then I wrote it all up. And then just about an hour or two ago, I said, what's the website show? And so I went to your website, I looked at it, and your website, again, for people that are tuning in, what's your website?
Very simple. Runwithduke.com. Runwithduke.com. It'll give you our priorities, and you'll also find all the links to our social media activities.
Good. And then if they want to contribute to your campaign, how do they do that?
There is a donate button there, but I've told people that I'm not actively soliciting from anyone. I am self-funding this race until after the primary.
Good. Okay. So, hey, I went through this and it gave a great, told a great story about who you are, what you've done, where you've come from. And that's huge, but it didn't really explain to me why you're running to be our next governor. Why have you decided to do this?
I know you have a limited amount of time, so I'll keep it short. I could give you 100 good reasons why, not only why I am the best candidate and why I'm running, but it's better to kind of summarize it down to a simple fact. I've been in the state for 54 years. I went to high school in Silver City. I graduated from Alamogordo. I went to New Mexico State University. New Mexico has been my entire life. It's my present, it's where my employees, it's where my company is, it's where my home is, it's where my future has been. But throughout, especially this last decade, I think everyone who watches this would agree, this has been the worst decade in New Mexico's history, and we have never been lower when it comes to crime or healthcare or the economy. And I waited to see who was going to step up. I didn't announce till December 14th, but I waited faithfully thinking that there would be a good candidate out there, and it never happened. So after weighing all the options on December 14th, I said, I am the best candidate to win this primary, and more importantly, very important, win the election in the general election in November. I'm the candidate that can beat Deb Haaland, who is clearly going to be the eventual nominee in New Mexico for the Democratic Party.
Tell you what, I have to say she scares the heck out of me. She, as a member of the Laguna Pueblo, as Interior Secretary, she trampled the sovereignty of the Navajo Nation when she, came up with the limiting oil and gas drilling around Chaco Canyon. If she did that with fellow members from indigenous group of New Mexicans, what is she going to do for the rest of us? And then lastly, I don't know if you know this, but her daughter occupied a section of the Department of Interior's building in Washington. And, if that's how she behaved as Secretary of Interior in her family, what would she do as governor? That's why it's important that we'll elect a Republican for governor. And number two is we elect the individual that can beat Deb Haaland. So I appreciate you jumping right in there. It's not easy to run for office. I appreciate you doing it. So one of the questions I had was that, you were chief operating officer of Loveless Medical or Loveless Hospitals. And that goes back so far. You were the chief operating officer in that. You've served as health services with Gary Johnson. So how in the world do we have, I just look at it and go, how did we get to the bottom of all the states with healthcare, child welfare, and then we've got young men, adolescents that are just dropping out of school, everything, and just retreating from society. And so how did we get there, and what do we do to get out of it?
We have to be real honest about how we got here. New Mexico, for the last decade, particularly under this governor, who I know very well, I've known Michelle for 25, 30 years. I knew she was bad 25 years ago, and she's worse today. This progressive left wing of New Mexico's legislature wants and people are saying this is kind of harsh to say it. I mean it sincerely. They want a liberal, progressive, socialist agenda. Entrap as many people, young people as possible, as many adults as possible in every social program that we expand, be it Medicaid or SNAP or their most recent push, universal child care. And when you say that, it has to have like reverberation, universal child care, like it's going to save the earth. What she's pushing is nothing more, truly, it's nothing more than a expansion of state-funded, taxpayer-paid daycare. That's what it is. They basically want everybody indebted to them, enrolled in every social program, you name it, and we have one for it. Long as they do that, they believe they have control. And when it comes to healthcare, there will be never in New Mexico's history a healthcare governor like myself, because we've never had one. No one has owned hospitals and clinics and group practices and run them as an executive. No one has built and reformed Medicaid under Governor Gary Johnson. I love healthcare. I think New Mexico can once again be a great healthcare destination. But our current pathway now is going to be a completely decimated healthcare model. Just this week alone, this should make people particularly uncomfortable. This week alone in Los Alamos, realize this, Los Alamos County is one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country. They just shut down labor and delivery services at their hospital. That's what we face in every community. Our rural communities are about ready to lose their healthcare support. Our main two hospitals in Albuquerque proper, in the last 3 years, Presbyterian's lost $1 billion in operating losses over the last 3 years. And UNMH, which should be another crown jewel, it's lost $500 million. So my point being is we need to fix healthcare, not yesterday, immediately today, and it will be my first immediate focus on day one.
So I'd like to add to what you said about the birthing centers in Los Alamos. New Mexico now has more abortion clinics than we have birthing centers. It's less of a drive to have an abortion than it is to have a child. And that is, and we talk about child welfare, it starts at birth. And I gotta say, God, Michelle Lujan Grisham, what a wonderful person to talk to. She's personable. She's got a great smile. I wish I could have a greater smile as she has. And she's pleasant. She listens. She nods. She pays attention. And one of the reasons I ran for U.S. Senate is I went to Washington. I met with Martin Heinrich. I met with Ben Ray Lujan. I met with Michelle Lujan Grisham. I met with them. And they didn't care what our contractor group had. They didn't want to listen to us. They had their agenda. They smiled, they nodded, and they continued with their agenda. And Duke, we're counting on you. We're counting on our Republican candidates to win in November, and that's got to happen. We got to turn it around. The other one is our doctors are leaving. Our UNM med students that are graduating are leaving. And they're not leaving because we provide a great place for doctors. They're leaving because other states, have, a better environment for doctors. What's your thoughts?
I would tell you, Mick, first of all, just a brief comment about Michelle. I've known Michelle a long time. One of the first piece of advice I gave Gary Johnson is you need to fire her immediately because someday she's going to be a big problem. And guess what? She is absolutely that problem now. You realize Bill Richardson fired her. So you may tell me she's charming and she's this and that. I will tell you, the moment you walk out of the room, she tells her staff, forget about anything I said. Let's go do what we're going to do. That's the kind of person she is. Now, about keeping doctors here, making sure we succeed, we have to turn the entire prism of life of what New Mexico is completely over and realize we can't be a state focused only on program spending. We need to get money back into families, back to families, more in their pocketbook. And I'll give you an example. 3 top agenda items when it comes to putting money back in families' pockets. Mick, we have to eliminate state personal income tax, not reduce it, not phase it out, eliminate it immediately. When I mean that, I mean be like Texas, be like Nevada, no tax return from the state ever again. It is no state personal income tax. We need to, and that'll keep doctors here, by the way. That'll keep good doctors, good nurses, and good teachers to stay in New Mexico. Eliminate New Mexico gross receipts tax on all retail sales. What that means to the average everyday family when they go to buy a box of Pampers or a container of toilet paper or toothpaste or everyday life needs, no gross receipts tax, right off the top. Finally, the number one complaint I actually hear about when you go talk to voters, they go, Duke, why am I paying property tax on a property that's mine? Why am I leasing it back from the state, it feels like? And I've said all along, we need to basically eliminate state property tax on all real estate. My buddy's apparently wants to be up here, so he's jumping into my lap. He just jumped up while I was talking, so he's going to have to sit here. But no, I think the elimination of those 3 things immediately puts wealth back into our New Mexico families' pocket. And remember this, the state doesn't want families. When you prioritize abortion clinics over medical necessities, prenatal care, maternity care, deliveries being available within your county, you are telling the world exactly what you value. And what we do not value in New Mexico, we do not value families at all.
I agree with that 100%. I share with people that we need, we need industry that provide good paying jobs that support families. And we don't have that. And so when I look at, we keep trying to buy a job, $1 billion to entice a company to build solar panels in Albuquerque. And I look at it and say, well, you have to spend that kind of money because when your healthcare is as bad as it is, our education is bad as it is, as crime is bad as it is, and all of these different things, then yeah, you have to spend big bucks. But we need to get to the point where we're at the top of all the states' list of what makes great states. And we're not. We got to turn that around. So I'm looking at that. We talked about good paying jobs. So about crime, you in your priorities, you talk about, and let me pull it up here. It has to do with crime, and it has to do with the revolving door. Stop the revolving door for violent offenders. How do you expect to do that?
2 things. First of all, a little background. I used to sit on the juvenile parole board. I actually watched these files get handed to me, and they would bring me 40 kids who were in juvenile detention with the city, the county, or the state. And immediately I started reviewing each file, and each young person was brought before us to tell us how remorseful they were and how we were going to adjudicate them. And I was supposed to help make that, as chairperson, a decision on how we adjudicated. Mick, I learned immediately that my job wasn't to adjudicate these files. They told me immediately, no, Duke, understand, you need to release these 40 kids because we've got to make beds available for the next 40 kids. That's all we do. And that's what I talk about when I hear the revolving door. I've said, if you want to deal with juvenile justice or adult crime in New Mexico, it requires more than a commitment, which I agree to, about hiring more police officers. Yes. Paying them more. Yes. Making sure their pension plan, all those things are common. What we have to do is we need to identify 4 things and deal with them. The reason we are number 1 in crime is 4 drivers. Number 1, picture this, poverty. If you have your population in poverty with high dependency, with no future, no jobs like you talked about. If you keep your people unemployed, fully dependent upon the state or the Fed, if you allow yourself to be poverty driven, that will contribute to crime. Number two, a failing education system. I'm not sure you've heard the latest stat. 32,000 young people who are school age young people are neither in the classroom or working. So what do you think they're doing? They're not just playing video games, they're getting into trouble. They're shooting other kids, they're shooting adults, they're mugging, they're robbing. 32,000. If you have poverty and a failing education system, you'll have crime. Let me add two more things. Number three, mental health. When these young people or adults go into crisis, we need to have mental health, and they need to be open to having that treatment. But when they refuse to take treatment, then we have to have other methods, including incarceration. Number three, addiction. We need to shut those borders down, stop the trafficking of fentanyl, heck, the trafficking of human beings, deal with addiction immediately. So if you see those four items, poverty, education, mental health, and addiction, when those four policies collide, you have crime. So my vision has been absolutely to realize it's more than just law enforcement. It's to protect and improve society. So law enforcement is actually the last point we intervene, not the first point.
Okay. I agree with that to a certain extent. This was years ago. I was on the radio show over with Eddie Aragon, and he called me up and said, "Mick, do you want to go see this video?" And this was the shooting of UNM baseball player Jackson Weller. We went over and I got to see the video over at near the Imbibe bar on Central. And Jackson Weller wasn't killed. He wasn't murdered. He was executed. And he was executed by Darian Bashir. And he was out on the street. He should have been behind bars. He should have been, we got rid of the bail bond system. Me personally, we need to have that back in place. So somebody like Darian Bashir would be behind bars waiting trial. So Darian had shot somebody in the gut. And because they put him out on the street, he intimidated the witnesses so they wouldn't testify against him. Then he's now back on the street. He got busted for a drive-by shooting and was back on the street. And then this happened. And I'm looking at saying, just awful. My daughter had a home invasion her last term in college at UNM med school. The police knew who he was. My she's a radiologist. She's never coming back here. Never will come back. My daughters will never come back to Albuquerque because of the crime. And I'm looking at this. We need, personally, it's up to, it's your policy. But I'm saying we got to somehow get back to the bail bond system because what we have now isn't working.
But I 100% agree with the bail bond situation being restored. But it's more about accountability. And that sounds simple. This should shock every viewer right now. When Gary Johnson was governor, and even as recent as a decade ago, do you realize, Mick, the average number of inmates we had within our state prisons was 10,000? Do you know today it's 5,000? So no one's going to convince me that our adult population has just become less criminal. The complete opposite. So when we don't lock people up, if we don't hold people accountable, our pendulum has swung so far to the other side, which I mean the left side. We think that every person is subject to rehab. And there's this weird, odd, crazy, almost socialist belief that rehab and diversion is the answer. No. In fact, when you do the crime, you're going to do the time. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. If you're a criminal and you act outside the norms of adult or juvenile behavior, you have to be held accountable.
Amen to that one. I agree. My business guy, I could go on about the trucks, vehicles, equipment, material being stolen. APD has strictly turned into, for property crime, just the first step in the insurance program. So you get a theft, you call the police, not the first step to recover your material or equipment or to prosecute the criminals is just to fill out the paperwork for the insurance company. And that's just awful. So you talked about the taxes, you talked about, and amen to that one. I tell you what, I applaud you on that. We talked about it earlier. We've got $71 billion in our rainy day fund. And so the taxes are going to deal with the budget surpluses. Looks like to me. But we got this $71 billion and we're saving it for who knows what. So the question is, where would you spend, say, 20 billion of it?
You know, I've tried to educate folks along this journey about the difference between spending and investing. As a businessman, you know that there are things that you can have cash outflow that are nothing more than expenditures that are quickly gone. Rent, utilities, that's spending. And then there's investing, buying a new truck, buying a new building, buying a new forklift, things that you put into production to either improve the practice of your business or increase your ability to make more money, more revenue. In our state, all we do is spend. We never invest. If you ask me, where would I invest this money? Imagine this. I think we should build not 1, 2, or 3, but 5 or 7 desalination facilities. Do you know that Texas now has 50 desals? 50 desalination facilities. And some would say, well, Duke, we're not by the ocean. No, but we have an ocean of water called brackish water right beneath our surface that can be converted into usable water. Mick, this would shock people that the largest desal facility in this country is in El Paso. 27.5 million gallons of water are being produced every day.
Wow.
I'm telling you, we need one of those in San Juan County, Doña Ana County, Bernalillo County, you name it, Lee County. We could build 5 to 7 overnight, and that would cost you about 200 million per. So that'd only spend about 1.7, 1.4 billion. So capital projects that improve our life, not vanity projects, not the rail runner, not sport, right, not things that look good, and not, we have so many things that I've said over and over. Spend on programs, invest in progress. That's the big difference. Invest in progress that create permanent jobs, not just jobs during construction phase, but permanent jobs. I don't know if you're familiar with the big project being debated down in southern New Mexico called Project Jupiter.
Right.
Project Jupiter's, they need 4,000 carpenters for that job. It is going to be a $165 billion capital program. And they're saying, but Duke, it's going to use up our water, our power. I'm going to tell you, as a businessman, having done Wall Street and Main Street, I'd make sure the deal works for New Mexicans, period. You've got to build me 3 desal facilities. You've got to enhance the grid and put more power back in than what you take out. We suck, literally, at making good deals from the state of New Mexico's position. We just need to make better deals and invest wisely and expect results. Imagine that as a business person, wanting results for every dollar you either spend or invest. That's the secret.
I agree with that 100%. The desalinization, it's huge. There was a company here about 10 years ago that developed a low energy, low temperature desalinization plant, and they couldn't get any assistance, couldn't get the state involved to buy in to help develop that. And I'm looking at that. I also, early in my career, worked for an industrial contractor. I worked out in Virginia. That wastewater treatment plant that we built was drinking water quality when it was done.
Exactly.
You could take a glass and put it there at the tap as the water came out after the pipe, and that water out of the wastewater treatment plant was put back in the streams to be pulled out for the towns down the river. So there's that opportunity. The other one is our roads. Our roads are, I drive all over the state. You are now driving all over the state. You have. And, I don't drive my wife's sedan because the roads are so awful.
I drove this
drive
last,
a pickup or a
this last
SUV.
Thursday. I drove from Albuquerque to an event in Ruidoso. I pulled over 2 times. The first one was to cross the Rio Grande right there just outside of San Antonio, where the Al Cafe is.
Yeah.
And I put it on our social media, and I encourage people, go to our social media and listen and watch and learn. I drove across and I did a video of the river, and it saddened me. It saddens me from the standpoint, Mick, it's completely dry. And people are saying, oh, but Duke, it's been dry like that for years. That's my point. It's dry, and we just accept that. That's the way a river is supposed. No, it used to flow. Number 2, I pulled over because at one point we hit a pothole. We thought we had a flat tire. The driver, Kentron, and myself were going down there, and he says, Duke, and the car swerved over. There's no question we damaged the alignment in that pothole.
Yeah.
So, yes, our infrastructure sucks. Our water's declining and getting worse. I hate the fact that New Mexicans find that now acceptable, that we have a new low standard, and that low standard is tolerance. And I've said enough. We have the money. We have the resources. And I will say this every community I've gone to, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but here's my single summary message for every voter. New Mexico is not a poor state. We are absolutely the worst run state in the country, period.
I agree with that. So, we talked about, I know what I was going to talk about, the desalinization. It's not going to surprise me. We are going to be limited to the water we can take out of the Colorado, and we have to develop those desalinization sources. So before we head out, got one question for you. And I think, we talked about it before, is the courts approved you to run for governor, but they didn't say, and it's kind of like, the Democrats it's going to be Lucy in the football, and you can run and then you win, but you can't serve as governor. What's your response to that?
If you look at the last decade, there's probably not been a candidate that both the Democrats and the Republicans has tried to stop from being on the ballot. We've never had a candidate like myself that both sides, my opponents on the Republican side, the establishment, and the Democrats, because they know one truth. It is very clear from the New Mexico Supreme Court ruling and the Constitution, the way it's written, I absolutely meet every requirement to run, which I'm running, and to serve as governor, and not for a short term. It amuses me that we keep talking about Duke, and because Duke is the greatest threat to Deb Haaland being elected, and she's going to be the eventual nominee for the Democrats. What candidate can we put up against Deb Haaland? It's me. And by the way, if we're talking about Deb, everybody should sit back and take a deep breath about what about Duke? They should realize Deb has lived where for the last 5 years? It certainly hasn't been in New Mexico. And you remember those issues with Martin Heinrich and every other candidate. That doesn't lead to anything. The fact is, the bottom line is, I am going to be the candidate. I am going to serve. And New Mexicans, particularly Republicans, have got to decide who can win in November. It's math. It's real important. No Republican can win on their own. No Democrat can win on their own. They need a candidate who can pull over soft Ds, who can pull northern New Mexican Hispanics, who can bring business leaders, independents over to our side of the ledger. And I can do that.
Good deal. So we need to wrap it up, Duke. So a couple of things. Is there anything that we didn't cover you'd like to say to the voters that are tuning in today?
It doesn't take a rocket scientist, even though we have a lot in New Mexico, to understand what our three major issues are. The pollings have demonstrated over and over. Crime, I'm going to deal with it. Healthcare, I am probably the most skilled expertise in this state, if not the country, when it comes to healthcare. And the economy, I want to fix the economy. We have a stagnant population. We have a stagnant economy. I've built jobs my entire life, not state jobs, not school jobs, not federal jobs, real jobs with real paychecks. When it comes to the important issues of New Mexico, I can deal with everyone. The challenge now is for voters to get out and vote in this primary. Vote for the candidate who can beat Deb Haaland in November. And by a hint, let me hint you that we have some math playing on here. And this is going to sound very offensive when I say this. There's math. And let me try it this way. There is a reason why Atlanta, Georgia has had a black governor for the last 50 years. There is a reason Atlanta has had a black mayor, period. A black mayor for over the last 50 years consecutive. We need to note in New Mexico because of demography, and I'm not running as a symbol. Deb Haaland is going to tell you she's going to be the first Native American female governor in the country. I'm telling you, our last three governors in New Mexico have been Hispanic. All the polls point to one thing. The only person that can beat Deb Haaland is a male Hispanic Republican. Beats her in every poll. And there's only one male Hispanic Republican on this ballot, and that's me.
Good deal. And Duke, if somebody wants to get more information on your candidacy, where do they go again?
I would strongly recommend to learn more about us by going to our website, runwithduke.com. Real simple, 3 words, runwithduke.com. And when you get there, so you don't have to find all our Facebook and Twitter and X or whatever, at the bottom of the homepage are all the links. A great starting point is go to our Facebook, see our social media, look at our videos, look at our priorities, and I think you'll learn a lot about us, and I think it'll help you make that final choice. Vote for Duke. Find more about it at runwithduke.com.
Duke, thank you very much. We need to bring it to a close. And again, this is Mick Rich with To The Point. Thank you.
Thank you.